In this video, I would like to discuss something related to Aristotle's Poetics. Specifically, I would say a few things regarding the universality of literary truth or poetic truth, as has been suggested by Aristotle. I have, while discussing the text in my classes, always maintained that Aristotle's Poetics is, among other things, also an answer to Plato's interrogation and rejection of poetry or literature as a medium of truth. Plato, from his idealist point of view, maintained that literature or poetry are copies of copies or copies of copies of copies which lead us further and further away from truth. Truth, as is known for Plato, always exists in an ideal world. Whatever is visible in the real world is a copy of the idea of that thing in the ideal world. So literary representations are further copies of that, which makes the truth value of literary representations zero, or rather in the negative. That is why he had banished his poets from the ideal republic. The Greek poets that existed at that point of time did not find favor with Plato. In his Poetics, Aristotle takes a completely different view. He does not mention directly Plato in the text, but then if you read their propositions parallelly or together, it becomes obvious that it is a rejection of his master thesis, we can say. Aristotle maintains that literature represents or poetry represents truth which are universal in nature. That is not limited to one particular time, one particular place, or one particular person. For example, Hamlet. Possibly nobody like Hamlet ever existed. We don't know for sure, though there are historical antecedents that have been traced to Hamlet, the play. But then when we read Hamlet, Hamlet's dilemma, his depression, his indecision, all these things seem to be our own. It has been so for such a long period of time. Hamlet has enjoyed such a readership, such an audience across the globe. So it is a direct proof that Hamlet is more real than real, though he may not have existed in reality. The same with King Lear. So Aristotle, of course, he gave other examples. Hamlet or King Lear was not known to him. From within his domain of Greek poetry, he could foresee or he could, bring this hypothesis that literature should talk or talks about not what has happened, it is not necessary, but what could, what should, or what would happen within the realms of probability and possibility. There are nuances between these two terms, probability and possibilities. However, as of now, we can ignore this. Both as a whole means likelihood. When you represent, that is, you write a play or a novel, for example, you can very well write that you saw a man in the street dancing with his head in his hands, cut off head, chopped off head. That will not find favor with people, at least adult mature people, for a long point of time. In fairy tales or in mythologies, we get such things like Gawain and the Green Knight. But today, very few people would write like that unless one is following a school like magical realism, etc. So that means whatever is realistic, that has to be presented. Well, you can write a man dancing with a monkey on his head on the street. You can write about a man, running away with a goat. All these are possible, though exactly these two may not have happened. But a man dancing with his head in his hand is highly unlikely. At least till date, such a thing has not happened. So, this kind of things are to be avoided. Apart from this, emotions, sentiments, incidents. For example, possible incest in Hamlet, you know, or Hamletophilia, love affair, the loss of faith. All these things we encounter on a day to day basis, or revenge motive, war, love. All these human emotions and human situations, I'd say, are very universal. That was Aristotle's point. So he said that history is far lower on the rank or on the gradation of superiority to literature. Literature is far above history. Whatever history describes may have happened to one person at one place at one point of time, but whatever literature or poetry portrays can happen, ought to happen, may happen, or should happen to anybody anywhere in the world. That is why literature is quite universal, or let us say poetry. So, Aristotle's ideas about universality of poetry is grounded in his rejection of history also as being specific to time and space. I hope it is clear by now. However, I must add a rejoinder since this is basically for first semester people. But in the long run, you will also have to know that this kind of universality, or this idea of universality, has been severely criticized in postmodernism, postcolonialism, and other associated later developments. In short, the Aristotelian's hypothesis about universality of literature, which was canonized into the European literary tradition as one of the supreme values, has been found to be highly Eurocentric, patriarchal, and so on and so forth. So, in the long run, we'll have to negotiate with this also. As of now, I think it will be helpful for you to understand what Aristotle meant by the universality of poetic truth. All the best.